Overnight, Gaza once again found itself at the center of intense violence, as Israeli airstrikes reportedly killed at least 28 people, according to Gaza's health ministry, which operates under the authority of Hamas. Dozens of others were injured, and emergency teams continue to search through the rubble, raising fears that the death toll could still rise. Among the victims, local officials report that children were killed, highlighting once again the heavy civilian cost of this conflict. The strikes reportedly hit multiple targets across the Gaza Strip. In Gaza City, 2 apartment buildings were struck, along with a Hamas police station. According to local sources, both police officers and detainees were killed in that attack. In southern Gaza, reports describe an Israeli helicopter gunship striking a tent where a displaced family was sheltering. 7 members of that family, including children, were reportedly killed. These scenes have fueled growing alarm among humanitarian groups and civilians who believed that the ceasefire had at least reduced the risk of such deadly attacks. This escalation comes at a particularly sensitive moment. A US-brokered ceasefire, which came into effect in October, had just entered what was described as its second phase. That transition followed the return to Israel of the last remaining body of a hostage previously held in Gaza. The ceasefire was never meant to signal a full end to hostilities, but it was intended to stabilize the situation, reduce civilian casualties, and open the door to humanitarian relief and limited movement across borders. However, both Israel and Hamas have repeatedly accused each other of violating the ceasefire almost since it began. Israeli officials have now confirmed that they carried out the latest airstrikes, linking them directly to an incident in Rafah a day earlier. According to the Israeli military, troops discovered 8 Hamas fighters emerging from a tunnel in the Rafah area, an act Israel described as a serious breach of the ceasefire. In that incident, 3 Hamas fighters were reportedly killed and a senior Hamas commander was arrested. Israeli authorities say the subsequent airstrikes were aimed at Hamas commanders and infrastructure in response to that event. From the perspective of Gaza's civil defense and health authorities, however, the reality on the ground tells a different story. They report that civilians were clearly caught in the strikes and paid the highest price. If confirmed, this would make it one of the deadliest days since the ceasefire began in early October. According to figures cited by Gaza officials, more than 500 Palestinians have now been killed since the ceasefire was enacted, underscoring just how fragile and limited that agreement has been. The violence raises urgent questions about whether the ceasefire can realistically move forward. The second phase was supposed to include the partial reopening of the Rafah border crossing with Egypt, allowing a limited number of Palestinians to leave or enter Gaza. Israeli authorities had indicated that this would be done cautiously, possibly allowing only a few hundred people or even as few as 150 to cross initially. As of now, that plan has not officially been cancelled, but the latest escalation casts serious doubt on whether it can proceed as intended. What this moment reveals most clearly is the extreme fragility of the current arrangement. The ceasefire has not created trust between the two sides. Instead, it appears to be held together by constant negotiations, accusations, and threats of retaliation. For many Palestinians in Gaza, the renewed strikes feel like a return to full-scale war. One resident told the BBC that it felt as though war was coming back again, a sentiment that reflects widespread fear and exhaustion among civilians who have endured months of violence, displacement, and loss. Internationally, this situation places renewed pressure on the United States and other mediators who helped broker the ceasefire. Their challenge now is not only to prevent a complete collapse of the agreement, but also to address the underlying dynamics that make such ceasefires so unstable. Unresolved security concerns for Israel, the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and the absence of a broader political framework capable of delivering lasting peace. As events continue to unfold, the key question remains whether this latest escalation is a temporary breakdown within a fragile truce or the beginning of a much wider return to sustained conflict. For the people of Gaza and for the region as a whole, the answer to that question could shape the coming weeks and months in dramatic and deeply human ways.